Hey everyone, I hope you're well. This is the story about what if Naruto was neglected and became a Mist Shinobi. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well. So without any further ado, let's start the what if. Today we find the guild going about its daily routine, missions, training, or at the guild for those not competing. Well, except for scene right now in front of the guild hall, where we see Kale himself working out using the guild equipment. With nothing but a pair of black shorts, face mask and black slip-on shoes, we see him working up a major sweat as he bench presses roughly 1,000 pounds. At the same time we see Flare, Kana, Mira, Urza along with many of the female citizens watching like a romance movie. With drinks and fans to cool themselves off from the rancorous sight, even though it is only in the 70s with a lovely breeze. While the many males that gazed on were jealous with anime tears falling from their faces as they drank their sorrows away. As the bar was put down, we see Kale using the ropes to exercise with, his muscles flexing in the sun and the sweat making them glisten. It was like seeing a sculpture being made before their eyes. Several of the scar on his body made him all the more desirable, the metal arm made him look mysterious, and many wanted him to sign their copies of his Sorcerer Weekly even though it was several years old. Kana not really paying attention to her drink as she saw her lover train like a beast and was getting a free show, blushing up a storm. Mira and Urza were diving into some cake as they watched him. They were feeling so hot under the collar and belts but didn't want it to stop. Flare and though having seen beforehand and felt the godlike stature of their shared husband, simply grinned at the other girls till their eyes met for a moment. Chuckled while Flare giggled at them all. All the while swooning was heard in the background, as they watched him begin some katas using a wooden bow staff. At the same time we see several people walk up to see what is going on, and as they walked by we see them with the saber-tooth emblem. "What is this?" the tall one with green hair said. The guild had gotten lost, looking for the wrong city which they had mispronounced. They had come to the nearest guild to look for directions. When they saw the large crowd of females nearby, the leader was curious and wished to see for herself, making her 7 companions come along. Minerva, Yukino, Orga, Rufus, Sting, and Rogue along with their exceeds made it up to the front and were shocked by what they saw. Kale was deadlifting both his new brides Urza and Mira in their loungers like they were nothing. While you could see he was sweating, he wasn't panting or anything like that. He looked fine from the rather strenuous workout regime. Those like Orga and Sting were in complete shock. Rogue kept his cool demeanor up, though watching made him feel slightly weary and a tad bit jealous. Those like Yukino were just blushing and sputtering at the show before them, but for Minerva, daughter of the leader of Sabertooth, she liked what she saw, biting her bottom lip slightly. She knew he was a man of power and she liked that. "Who is that?" Gemma Orlando, the leader of Sabertooth, knowing of Fairy Tail but not its members. "That is Kale Erisher, Sage of the Fairies, Knight of the First Order of the Kingdom of Crocus, Bane of Zerif the Black Wizard, and the most dangerous man in all Fiori," a citizen of Magnolia stated. Sabertooth were now surprised by that statement as they now watched Kale put down the girls gently back on the ground and deciding to show off a bit turned Tati east where the ocean lay. Rainbow Dragon's Roar. With a demonic bellow he unleashed his roar over the ocean, which caused a massive rainbow overhead of the guild hall. Sabertooth were in shock. He was a dragon slayer, one they had never heard of, but his power was undeniable. The audience of Magnolia were enthralled by what they saw, and clapped for the show. Kale bowed to them all as he turned back around to look upon them. Suddenly, Wendy, Carla, Anna came up with holding little Mirti, who she gave to Grandpa. "Wow Dad, that was so cool," Wendy stated in awe. He chuckled and petted her head affectionately. As he tuned Mirti SND, she gave him a big kiss, to which the audience awed at seeing how cute it was. She missed her grandpa, since she lived with Altair and Kagura at Mermaid Heel. Little Mirti was the only person alive to have 2 guild marks and be allowed to with special permission from the Magic Council. Soon enough Mirti was talking up a storm about her week and what she did to Grandpa Kale, who nodded and would say, "You did that?" Or, "That sounds like fun," and just other little things even. She liked the fact he treated her like a big girl and didn't talk down to her, made her happy. The good mood was soon broken when a civilian yelled out Sabertooth was here. The Fairs looked over to see, then walking by, with Sting looking at him in awe, Rogue looking at him with respect and Minerva looking at him with lust. Pulling a blushing Yukino away with her, the other members of the guild looked at him warily, but soon stopped at the gates as the crowd began dispersing to get back to their own business. "So you are Kale Erisher, the ace of fairy tale?" Gemma spoke up, sizing up the supposedly dangerous man. Kale looked at him and already knew the kind of man he is. "No, Gildart Sylve is the ace. I am the sage of the fairies. You must be Gemma Orlando, the leader of Sabretooth. Greeting and welcome to Magnolia. We do hope it is to your liking. This city had much to offer and leaves our guests wanting to come back," he said respectfully with a slight bow. Fairy Tale smiled proudly at his words. They loved this city, and it had always been a part of them. Though he ignored it, Gemma looked right Kale. "I do hope you join this year's GMG. Sabretooth needs new meat to feed on. Fairy Tale is known as a weak guild and I despise weakness. Things like friendship and love should be snuffed out and left in the dirt where it belongs. You will taste my wrath, for we are Sabretooth, the bane of weakness, and you fairies will feel that soon enough." With his piece said, he spat on the ground in front of Kale and walked off, the guild behind him. Fairy Tale was now up in arms by this show of disrespect, but Makarov and Mira calmed them all down. "Ignore him. We all know that true strength comes from our hearts and the love we have for each other. We will win this year's games and we will show them all just what it means to fight a fairy," the former master said. The week of the Grand Magic Games had come. Many were excited to see the reigning champs Sabretooth perform again, but another was Fairy Tale's grand intro. In the meantime, Makarov smiled as he saw his family talking and getting back into the groove, like they had never left. He let Mikau keep his title as master while he helped out as advisor, and were now celebrating the grand wedding of Kale and his three new brides Mira, Urza and Kana, whom were ready and waiting, which had been spectacular with the crying Gildarts walking the trio down the aisle. Shaking his head of pleasing Mimiris, we now find out who the team will be for the games, as they could only have one, as Mikau began calling off the names of those participating. Natsu Dragneel. He stood up as the guild clapped for him. Little Merity hugged her daddy proudly, which made him smile. Grey Fullbuster. He stood up as well and was given a proud smile from his mother figure, which made him even more determined. Laxus Dryer. He stood up and nodded to his grandfather, ready for this, which Loki gave him a beaming smile. Gajeel Red Fox. He stayed seated eating some scrap metal, though Levi was clapping for him, which made him smile slightly, though only Kale, Gildarts and Makarov noticed. And finally, our team leader of this, Kale Erisher. He nodded as he stood up as well, his wives giving him smiles. Mira, Urza and Kana opted out as they were now 4 weeks pregnant. They had found out right before their wedding he was going to be a father all over again. 2-3 little bundles that made the guild cry out with pride and a grand celebration. Gildarts found out and fainted, which slightly shocked the entire guild, and knowing the kind of man he is, when he woke he hugged his baby and cried again, so happy for her SND to have his own grand baby. But Kana and Gildarts also got another surprise. Before the wedding, Kale came into the guild with someone that the two knew greatly. Moving aside a woman who looked a lot like Kana but with silver hair and raven-colored eyes that had glasses on them appear. She had a bright smile and tears in her eyes as she saw them. Kana gasped before covering her mouth as tears left her eyes when she saw it was her mother. Cornelia, Gildarts said in a shaky voice. She smiled at the pair. Gildarts, Kana, she said as her voice broke a bit. In her wedding dress, she ran to her mother and hugged her as she sobbed uncontrollably. She couldn't believe it at all. Gildarts just stood there. Though they had been divorced these last near 20 years, he still loved her more than any other women from his past. Once Kana let go, Cornelia moved to him and smiled up at him. She never stopped loving him. She reached up and gently touched his older and worn face. "Hello my love," she says softly. He was now in tears, trying to stifle the sniffling, but he couldn't. His body shook from the pain and excitement he was feeling. "Oh, how I have missed you so much. It hurt when you left. I never got to tell you how sorry I am. I am nothing without you, and I failed our family," he said softly, but his word had felt like they had been screamed out. "No, you didn't, but now none of that matter. I want a second chance to make our family complete again. I know I kicked you out and abandoned you, but would you please give me a second chance?" She asked him softly, her own tears falling. He said nothing but captured her lips and hugged her close to him. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed back just as fervently. There was still love there, and this was the chance to right those wrongs. Kana looked over at her husband-to-be and beamed at him. The love she felt for him was immeasurable, though she couldn't really speak because of all the emotions she was feeling, while he just gave a soft-eye smile to her, knowing this was a happy moment for them right now. Now the stadium was alive with the sound of cheering. Flags from the different guilds were up and flying as the MC for the night was speaking to the crowd. "Welcome to the 7th Annual Grand Magic Games," a small man in a scarecrow costume with a pumpkin on his head stated. The crowd poked again as he went on to explain the rules, then announced the teams, who came out one by one to their pops. "Finally we have a newcomer today. For the first time ever we have what was once the heart of Magnolia, Fairy Tail," he shouted. Their door opened up and out they came on their GMG attire. At first no one clapped till a voice spoke up. "Oh my gods, it's Kale Arisher the Yosei no Sennin." It was then that the crowd realized he was the man who saved the queen, and the excitement became palpable. The four were hearing the shouts and excited talk about them, which made their egos swell just a bit, as they stood with the other guilds, wearing their GMG outfits. Kale though wore something different. He had one black anbu pants and closed-toed shinobi boots, with red leather spiked wrappings on his ankles and shins, a purple battle vest with the fairy tale symbol on the back in white, black gloves that went to his elbows with the same red spiked leather, wrapped around his arms and palms, and a special-made face mask with the yuzu swirl in red. Many were looking at the leader of Fairy Tail in awe, and though his outfit was cool, especially the younger audience. Kale looked over at Arana, who was competing as well, and winked at her, which made her blush and giggle softly. Kagura looked over and saw what Kale was doing and smiled. She liked the man as well as Natsu, as he was not only the father of her stepdaughter but has been a big part of both her and Ultir's lives on a positive way. She has always to dislike males, but Kale, Natsu, and Simon were the three expectations to that. Kale looked to Kagura and Adi to his daughter-in-law in respect, which she reciprocated, and they went back to face forward as the pumpkin guy was about to announce the guilds competing. All the while the commentators were speaking about the teams and guilds and such. "Okay, now that they are all here, let's begin with the reigning camps for the 7th year in a row, Sabertooth." The crowd went insane for them. Blue Pegasus, Lamia Scale, Mermaid Heel, Quattro Cerberus. And finally we have newcomers to the competition. For the first time ever, let us give it up for Fairy Tail. The crowd had stopped cheering but got louder for them than even Sabertooth, with many of the females yelling for Kale to sign their copies of Wizard Weekly from 7 years prior, much to many males' chagrin. Okay folks, this year's first event is called Hidden. All of a sudden Gray vanished from his spot and was placed in a large city nearby, with the other members of the team going off to their safe spots. Hidden goes as in canon. By the end of it, Rufus Lore was in the lead and Jaeger was in last place. The crowd went wild for the battles. Gray managed to get 5th place in the whole, even though he had been double teamed a bit by Lion and Rufus. He still was able to hold his own. Juvia clapped for her love, as he looked right at her mouth that was for her, which made her blush, though UR got a kick out of it. Hello again folks, that is all for today. Tomorrow he have the singles battles, so get ready for mayhem and have a good night. See you all again first thing. Before Gray knew it, he had been mobbed by Fairy Tail, with UR telling him how proud she is of him. It had been a good night for them, despite the placing. At the same time Kale had made clones to deal with Fairy Tail while he went to see how Mermaid Heel was. Knocking on the door, he was met by their guild master, who smiled and let him in, where he saw little Mirti was with Altair, Kagura, Arana, Miliana and Simon, who wasn't a true member of Mermaid Heel, but an honoree that worked as a merc for them. Little Mirti had looked over and saw him and squealed, running as fast as she could to him as he knelt down and hugged her, making her giggle as he ticked her. Altair also came over and hugged him, though not by blood, loved him just like she would had he been her real father. "Hi Dad," she said happily. "Hi Tear-chan." Breaking away, Arana came up and hugged her husband as well before Simon and Miliana greeted him as well. "So what do you think of the GMG so far?" Kagura asked her father-in-law. "Interesting, reminds of me of the old Jonin exams back home, just cooler I would say," he said with a chuckle. Several looked at him strangely, but Altair knew what he was saying. He had told her beforehand. He stayed with them for a bit, before heading back to Fairy Tail, for tomorrow would be interesting. The next day had come and the stadium was filled up and lacrimas were set all over so people could watch at home. Okay folks, we're now in singles battle and our first bout is Ren Akatsuki and Arana Webb. As the two made their way down to the floor, Ren was showing off for the ladies, making many in the audience swoon, though Arana was unimpressed as she looked over at her man and gave him a soft loving smile, to which he opened his palm and a rainbow-shaped heart appeared with her name in it, which got those like Urza and Lucy who were suckers for romance to awe at. Arana blushed a bit, then looked back again, her face stoic and her eyes focused. She would not lose to show what she can do and to make her guild and husband proud. With the ring of the bell she charged ahead and laid a horrible smack down on the blue Pegasus member. Once done she looked at her work and nodded before going back to her guild mates, though she did glance at Kale, who looked on proud of her SND. That made her feel good. Wow, that was quite the fight. The next fight will be Orga vs Warcry of Sabretooth and Quattro Cerberus. Jenny Raylight, the special commentator of the game, stated with contempt for the dog guild. The two made it to the down to the floor and waited for the bell. Once it did, Warcry made his attack only for it to be shrugged off by Orga like it was nothing and was brutally beaten down like he was just an inconvenience. The match was stopped and the now unconscious, badly injured Warcry was sent to the infirmary. Orga went back up to his spot and waited. At the same time those like Fairy Tail and Mermaid Heel were disgusted by what they saw so far. Okay folks, put final match of this event we have Jura Nikis and Laxus Dryer, Yajima stated onto the mic. Jura made his way down to the floor deep in though. He had originally hoped to fight Kale, but at least Dryer would be a good fight anyways. Laxus was about to make his way down when he was stopped by Kale with a hand on the shoulder. Doesn't matter if you won 100 times, as long as you won that one time, you will always be acknowledged for it. Laxus felt himself calm down and nodded with a slight smile as he walked down to the floor. Makarov was glad to see Laxus be the boy he used to be and felt it was all thanks to Kale, as he looked back to see Laxus now on the floor facing Jura. The pair nodded to each other on acknowledgement and signs of respect before the bell rang. The pair got into fighting stances and raced at each other, when their fists met and the resounding shockwave hit the crowd, many of them tumbling backwards. The kids like Maze, Asuka and Mirti were in awe of it and looked on with big eyes. The fight had been amazing. Despite the power gap, Laxus held his own for a while, but in the end Jura wasn't a wizard saint for nothing and FOT the upper hand, winning the bout, though Laxus gave him hell, as he was now on his knees panting, with burnt clothing and singed eyebrows. Winner of this fight Jura Nikis. Talk about a great fight, Chapati Lola stayed aloud. Okay folks, time for the next bout, the chariot. Upon the train cars stood the competitors. Risley Law, Bacchus Grow, Ichiya Kotobuki, Sting Eucliffe, Yuka Suzuki, Natsu Dragneel. While the others four looked ready to go, Sting and Natsu looked ready to puke. Once the bell rang, the six raced across the tops of the cars themselves, as the train began moving, with poor Natsu and Sting in the back looking like death warmed over. Come on daddy, you can do it, little Mirti yelled out to her father, with Altair cheering on as well, even though she was also cheering on Risley as well. Fairy Tail was cheering them on as well, though with Lucy and Lisanna being louder. Natsu looked over at Mirti, just felt the love she had for him, and taking a deep breath, shakily stood up. Then with one look at Lucy and Lisanna, seeing them cheer for him, he began walking as straight and steadily as he could. He would at least get 5th place for this, but he could say at least he made an effort. Which is what happened after he made it to the front caboose and laid on the ground panting, looming completely white. Lucy and Lisanna came over to help him up and they headed to their spot to relax again. As it stood right now, Sabretooth was in the lead, followed by Lamia Scale, Mermaid Heel, Blue Pegasus, Fairy Tail and finally Quattro Cerberus. Next up folks is more battling. Now then would Toby Horhorda and Eve Term come to the floor. Both did so and stood before each other and waited. Then the bell rang and the match over, as Eve had Toby's sock, which incapacitated him, and the match ended, which made everyone deadpan at him. What? Jenny asked monotoned. Right then will Gajeel Red Fox and Bacchus Grow come down to the floor, the pumpkin guy said. The two did so, though Bacchus began running his mouth. You know, for a guild with like 4 dragon slayers, you guys suck, he said with a shit-eating grin. Gajeel was now annoyed, a tick mark appeared on his head. Yo, what would you know, you drunken bastard, he shouted back. With that the bell rang, but Bacchus didn't move as he took out a small gourd and chugged from it. Once done he threw it away and got into his stance. Gajeel raced ahead and began his assault, which was shocking as he never made any contact with his opponent. The guy just bobbed and weaved in and out of the fight. But all it did was piss of Gajeel as he turned his arm metal and swung it sideways and hit the drunk hard, sensing him flying into the wall, which not only cracked it severely but also was so hard it knocked Bacchus out. Gajeel just sighed as the match was about to be called. They all heard laughing. SND saw Bacchus get back up, though he was now bruised, scuffed up and bleeding. But you could tell he was still knocked out. He was moving on instinct. What is this? Lola said on side commentary. It seems Bacchus is moving on pure instinct alone, and though hurt refuses to back down, Yajima stated in shock. Gajeel got back into defensive position as Bacchus made his attack, and it was brutal. They were beating the hell out of each other. Levi was now holding her hands near her heart for Gajeel's safety. It was now secret the boomworm loved to ass, so to see him on this way deeply scared her. By the end, both were standing there panting. But before anything else, Bacchus groaned and fell back, signaling he was done as his snores were loud. Gajeel shakily raised his arm up and screamed out he did it, with the crowd cheering him on, especially Levi, who was wiping away her tears. Gajeel saw Kale give him a nod of respect as the Iron Slayer fell back and passed out, being taken to infirmary. What a battle, folks, that just incredible, Lola stated out loud as Jenny and Yajima nodded along. Never have I seen a fight that vicious, but still I give credit to both men for putting up one heck of a fight, Jenny said, feeling the excitement in the air. Can you believe that fight, folks? We have one more fight and this one will hopefully be as good. Give it up for Kagura Mikazuchi and Yukino Agria. The two went down to the floor, though Kagura got a lovely kiss from her wife Altair before SEH went down, while Yukino was internally freaking out, hoping she wouldn't lose. Kale though noticed this and narrowed his eyes as he left to go make a call to someone who he know needed to be here, someone Yukino knows really well also, her big sister Angel. The two made it to the floor. SND the bell rang and they got into their stances, with Yukino pulling out her keys, which shocked Lucy. The fight began and it looked like Yukino might be the winner, but Kagura pulled out her sheathed sword and made her attack with accuracy and power. She took down the key spirit SND Yukino in one swift hit, knocking her out. Kale had just come back when he saw this, and made a clone for her to keep an eye on her just in case, and wait for Angel to come. And that is match. Kagura is the winner. This has been quite the event this year. We will be back in the tomorrow, for even more action, Lola said to the audience. With that they ended the day and everyone went about their day. In the hotel where Sabretooth was at, Yukino had been stripped to nothing, where Giemma berated her much to her humiliation, leaving her in tears. You are weak and there is no weakness here. We are the best of the best. You have no place here. Begone from Sabretooth and never return, you stupid little child, he barked at her harshly. With a nod she did so, grabbing her clothing and left, while her guildmates gave her sympathetic looks and nods. Once dressed she grabbed her bags and left, her feet on the cobblestone walkway. You know, if you need somewhere to go, I might have an idea. Yukino stopped and turned as tears left her eyes. Behind her as she saw Angel and Kale, they're looking at her warmly. Dropping her bag she raced to Angel and hugged her, crying. Angel looked at her friend and nodded. He went to pick up her bags and headed to Angel's hotel room, where they got her situated and she fell asleep in her big sis's arms. But for the Proto-Slayer, he glowered. The leader of Sabretooth has effectively earned his ire and would be making it known soon. But for now he went back to his room to relax and get Teddy for tomorrow. The next day came and this one was quite the exciting prospect for those watching. This event was called Pandemonium and this one would show just how powerful they are. The contestants for this were as follows. Miliana Mikazuchi, Ichibiki Lance, Jura Nikis, Noberly, Orga Nanagir. Kale Arashur. The pumpkin guy gave each a card, and a number appeared on the card with Kale getting number 1, which excited everyone and no one truly knew the extent of his power. The others moved away from the arena back to the stands, but not before Miliana told him good luck, to which he nodded to her with an eye smile. "Well, what setting would you like?" Pumpkinhead asked. "Put the Armageddon setting down," he said softly. Everyone went quiet with eyes wide and moved unhinged in total shock. "Really, that 1,000 creatures you're fighting?" Kale nodded to him and the button was pressed as the pumpkin guy moved back as well, and the arena was reshaped and the monsters appeared, including 100 titan-like creatures. Kale said nothing as he chuckled and cracked his neck. He pulled out his sword, pressing the button, and the various colors appeared with lightning crackling around it as like a shell, which made many look on in fascination at the weapon. He then vanished from sight, making people gasp in shock. As they looked around, they saw about 10 crushed in a second and saw Kale again, his body covered in power. As he plowed through them, they were nothing. "My god, this is insane," Lola stated aloud in shock. "Cool," replied WW reporter Jason, shaming with excitement. Kale had just finished when he looked to see a small battalion coming at him, putting the weapon away. He made several hand signs, and his hands were covered in lightning. Lightning style, electric murder. He shot the lightning off and took about 50 out in one hit, but they just kept coming. Wind release, godly wind from the mountain. Slamming his hands together, powerful wind gust hit the monsters, sending them into the castle walls, destroying them. But there was still more there as he made 2 more clones, and began making hand signs for his signature jutsu he uses back on the bridge Nami no Kuni all those years ago. Water style, water dragon. Fire style, Hellspawn's flame. Wind style, great breakthrough. Unison raid, boiling dragon, typhoon. The trio made their jutsu and combined them, turning them in a dragon twister that was on a collision course for the rest of the battalion, which hit and caused massive devastation, leaving nothing in its wake. At the same time, the crowd couldn't believe what they were seeing. They were watching the legendary Sage of the Fairies go to work like it was nothing, and the tension was hot all over the stadium. The guilds, including Fairy Tail, were in shock by this, as little was known of Kale's power. "Just how powerful is he?" Biska asked aloud, seeing her guild mate and close friend show the true extent of his might and not even break a sweat. But no one answered. At Mermaid Heel, Altair, Kagura and Arana were in complete shock. "What the hell is he?" Risley asked in awe and slight fear. While the trio were speechless, in all the years they had known, never had he shown that level of power, but little Mirti was loving this, seeing her grandpa on action. She was yelling and cheering for him, which in turn broke them out of their states, and they too began cheering. At Lamia scale, even Jura was shocked by his power. He could take the top spot from God Serena, he said to himself on awe. Lion, Yuka, and the others watched on in amazement. At Quattro Cerberus, they all howled in acknowledgement. They realized he was the true alpha here. At Blue Pegasus, they were in the same boat. "Oh my goodness," Bob said aloud, mainly to himself as he watched in fascination at Makarov's boy. Ichiya and the boys were in shock by his power, so shocked he didn't bother using the word man. Though Jenny and Sherry couldn't believe it at all, they too felt the excitement of seeing it firsthand. With Sabretooth they stood by in complete silence seeing this. Though GMO was furious, he felt he should have that kind of power, not this loser before him. He was so angry he gripped his chair's armrest and cracked them. It was loud that those that looked on saw splinters coming off the wood. Back with Kale, he saw a bigger monster come into play. So he made the 2 more clones, and they made hand signs. He wanted to take it up a notch. Lava release, meteor shower. Ice release, freezing tundra. Wood release, sapping vines. Kale stood there as wooden vines appeared under the Titan, holding it in place as one clone's molten lava balls hit the creature, heating it up, as it shrieked out in pain. Before the other clone's ice hit it, freezing it solid, though it soon began to melt from the heat under it and exploded not too soon after. Kale then vanished again and plowed through the monsters more, and before the half hour was up, on 500 monster remained. Kale then opened his hand, and a purple ball of condensed chakra appeared, then began growing bigger as 4 blades appeared on it, and a horrible screeching sound was heard. Wind release, Raisin Shuriken. Throwing it, it hit another titan along with several other monsters near it and disintegrated inside the sphere. He now began to sweat a bit, but not enough to make a difference, but he was ready to finish this. So he made several hand signs and spewed a fire dragon onto the sky. The sky darkened as lightning formed in the clouds. "It's time for you to vanish." In the sound of the thunderclap, "Now begone, Kirin." A large lightning dragon appeared and raced at the rest of the monsters, hitting them dead on, and all was engulfed in bright light, making everyone close their eyes, which died down a minute later. Once everyone opened their eyes again and saw not only the monsters gone, but the castle as well, they were in complete shock. No one could speak. Not even the princess or her guard, who had been watching the whole time. The tension was there, and they could see this man had the power to rival the kingdom of Fiori itself. Kale said nothing as he raised his hand and gave the fairy tale salute, taking a deep breath. And like the trance was broken, the crowd went wild for his performance. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, but it had been recorded and would become the most viewed lacrima in Fiori history for years to come. Fairy Tale were also cheering and whooping, seeing how not only had Kale beat back 1,000 monsters, but got them into first place. "My god, he is unrivaled," Hijui said in shock. Even her knights were mixed in their reactions of the whole thing. Some were feeling excited, others were feeling apprehension, but all felt respect for the guardian of Ishgar. He then walked back up to his spot as they continued on with the event, though now they had to use something else for the others. Not that they cared at the moment, they were all in a daze. Unknown to them, but this painted a bigger target on Kale's back than before. Night had come and they had to close the stadium down for repairs, so they will push the battles back for tomorrow instead. But for now all of Fairy Tale, including Ultra, Kagura, Arana and Mirti, were on the main guild room at their hotel standing before Kale. A long time prior he had promised to show them what the Magic Council SND Makarov had seen. Unfortunately today was that day. So with a heavy sigh he opened his eyes, showing them his Eternigan, and all went black. Time skip, check out prequel for details. When they all came back, no one said a word, but you could just how sad they all were for him. Urza, Kana, Mira, Flare SND Arana felt their hearts break for the man they loved as tears left their eyes, were in tears. Wendy, Mirti and Carla just sobbed for him. It scared them to think that could have been them. UR said nothing but felt a stronger connection to him as she reached over and held his hand. Altair just sat there in shock while Kagura just wanted to forget. "How did you survive that?" Arana asked him, wiping away her tears. He said nothing for the moment but just smiled at them all. As the bell rang 10 p.m., he stood up and stretched. "It doesn't matter anymore, the past is where I prefer it. Besides, I wouldn't change a thing, and it led me to here with all you. Let's go rest up. 2 more days of this event. You want your respective guilds to come out on top, don't you?" he asked. Just as it came, the heavy tension in the air vanished as Fairy Tale got pumped up for tomorrow, and Al headed to their rooms for the night, but the wives chose to stay with him instead. So using seals he altered the room and bed, making it bigger, and they all piled in for the night. Keeping the room at a slightly warmer temp, they all snuggled in for the night and slept happily in each other's embrace, even pregnant Urza, Kana and Mira. Kale smiled, though, feeling his baby's magic SND chakra in their wombs, soundly sleeping. Using a light genjutsu on them, the still growing babies slept wonderfully, giving their mother good dreams in the process. Even Flare, Arana and UR had wonderful dreams of their own, sleeping next with the man they had all come to love and appreciate. It was the 4th day of the games. This one was a real treat, for on the center of the arena was a large water bubble. This even was called Naval Battle. The contestants came, put on their bikinis, and got loud reactions from the crowds. Risley Law, Jenny Raylight, Minerva Orlnado, Kelia Blendy, Rocker, and Kale Arisher, as the others passed up on the even, as they didn't feel comfortable doing this. Plus Natsu, Gray, and Gajiel were given the stares of death as well. Laxus was still injured from Jura, so he sat with Loki nearby, who was tending to his need alongside Freed, who had ever been the good friend, and Batman. One by one they all came out, starting with Risley, who came out in a blue and brown 2-piece showing off her figure. But what got everyone was she had lost all that weight. SND now had a gorgeous figure. SND was taller by 5 inches than her normal height. She got wolf whistles and howls from the men in the audience and Quattro Cerberus, making her giggles at the boys. Next up was Miss Fiore herself, Jenny Raylight, who was a bombshell as she strutted, put in a two-piece pink and white with dark blue painted nails as she waved at the crowd and gave kisses and was working them much to their delight. Next was Kelia Blendy, who came out in a one-piece red and black, and even though she had the body, she was still underage, so she got an applause instead, which made her slightly pout. Last of the women was Minerva Orlando in a black, blue, and yellow two-piece with crimson nails which you could only see on her toes as she had long gloves on, to accent her already dangerous aura, who like Jenny was a bombshell, but while Jenny had the flirty girl next door vibe, Minerva had the forbidden fruit vibe. Received an ovation like Jenny, but she didn't care enough about that. She wanted to see the object of her desires. Next up was Rocker from Quattro Cerberus. He came out in a red speedo, and while muscled was completely hairy, and looked more like a man-beast, which gave many a women chills and hot spells. Finally out came Kale on a pair of purple spandex shorts that clung to his body and a purple face mask, showing off everything much to the female audience's delight, and got a better ovation than Rocker. His body was much more defined than Rocker's, but not as bulky as Elfman's, but he had nothing but pure muscle and 8-pack which could grade metal, and several scars all over, including one over his chest where his heart was and his metal arm, which made many gasp in either horror or sick fascination. The ladies looked and had mixed reactions. Kelia and Risley cringed seeing the metal appendage, while Jenny and Minerva licked their lips at his body and below, though you could also see the blush on their faces as well. In the stands, Urza was incensed at his wares, showing off his blessing, yelling at him to change, while Mira and Kana giggled at the weapon that got them pregnant and more. UR and Arana slightly drooled at her husband's body, while Flair blushed and stuttered out about their wedding night to herself. But the men all either exuded jealousy or depression at him as they saw their female family members blush at him and giggle or drool. It seems Kale has made quite an impact on this, even just like yesterday's. Is there nothing he can't do? Lola asked with a chuckle, to which Yajima also chucked. Jason, who was the guest, began scribbling down notes for an interview with Kale again soon after the games. Okay, you six get inside the bubble. Once you're all inside and situated, we will begin the match, Pumpkin Guy said. One by one they all got inside the bubble and began getting accustomed to the pressure, and soon enough they were able to breathe inside it due to the special magic, though Kale had seals on him for this purpose. Then the bell rang, and without warning the other four swarmed him, knowing he was the true dark horse in this fight, while Minerva stood back waiting for her chance. But try as they might, he either dodged or blocked and would only get in a jab or two here and there. Kale though really wanted to fight Minerva, so without warning he made a 3 hand signs and opened his eyes, showing off the Eternigan again, and suddenly the four went to sleep where he had clones take them out of the bubble and place them on solid ground before dispersing. Wow, he took 4 of them with a sleeping spell, and now he is looking to face off against the Queen of the Tigers. This is so cool, Jason yelled out, spinning in his chair. Yes, indeed, this is going to be quite the fight, Yajima stated. So you ready to fight, milady? He asked her respectfully. She smirked and into her stance. Even if he was stronger, she was much more crafty, SND resilient. And so she activated her magic and began her attacks. But to her shock and surprise, he either dodged her attacks or blocked them, and it always seemed like he had eyes on the back of his head. So she went for the straightforward approach, and the two began to fight again. She threw a punch and blocked it, he threw a knee, she blocked, and this is how it went for a while. Though Gemma was disappointed in her, to him she was still weak, a mistake he needed to rectify soon. Kale suddenly felt Darker aura and knew where it was coming from, letting guard down for a moment, which Minerva took advantage of and decked him square in the face with quite a lot of force. Though it only snapped his head to the left as he shook the bats out of his belfry. Damn, you got a nice right hook, he complimented. She smirked at him again. Thanks, hot stuff, she sighed with a sultry voice. She then made her attack again, ignoring the shocked looks from all who saw that hit. Time was just about done and Kale didn't want to be in the water anymore, so as she made to throw a magic-infused punch, he caught her arms and wrapped them behind, holding her in place against him, which made blush and look at him in shock. He said nothing as he rocketed out of the bubble, landing on the dirt ground with a thud which cracked the floor slightly. Though both were still on their feet, he let her go and gave a small bow before walking back to his guild. That's it, folks, Fairy Tail and Sabretooth are tied for this round, Yajima said, pleased at having seen another great match. Though Minerva stood there, the blush still present on her face as she shivered slightly, walking back to her guild as well. She now knew she would make this man hers no matter what. Tex got to work on the floor and removing the bubble, so they had a small intermission, where Urza lectured Kale about wearing such apparel outside of the bedroom as she blushed at his physique, though he just chucked and went and got dressed. "He makes me thirsty," Mira said as Kana began drinking some of her favorite green tea since she opted out of booze and now that she is going to be a mother. Much to Cornelia's happiness, Gildarts, who had left for a mission so he could buy him and Cornelia a home, had also decided to cut back as well, because he only really drank to numb his pain. But now that pain was gone, he didn't feel the need to drink as much or as heavily. Once all was done, Kale came back on his uniform again and saw the stage was ready, watching as Natsu and Gajeel went out to the field ready for their fights, wondering if they were up to the task or would their opponents win this round. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.